Our scripture text comes from the Gospel of Mark this morning, chapter 9. Then they came to Capernaum, and when he was in the house, he asked them, "What were you arguing about on the way?" But they were silent, for on the way they had argued with one another about who was the greatest. He sat down, called the 12, and said to them, "Whoever wants to be first must be last of all, and servant of all." Then he took a little child and put it among them. And taking it in his arms, he said to them, "Whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me. And whoever welcomes me welcomes not me, but the one who sent me." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. It's good to be with you. It's been a little bit for me. And the last time I was here, the choir wasn't here. So, choir, good to see all of you. Mostly, good to hear all of you. Thanks for joining us in this chorus of worship, friends. That you and I bring our unique voice. As Alex was saying in that children's sermon, right? That we all have a unique voice that we are bringing here. And it can either sound like that, or it can sound like our culture. Think about our culture right now. We sound like a cacophony of voices rather than a choir, right? Our world sounds dissident and crazy, right? And chaotic, even though it's just diversity. But done the right way sounds glorious. And my hope today is to help us understand how we can get from the one place of chaos to a place where we are a symphony of voices, all in our difference, all in our diversity, all in the ways that God has made each and every one of us distinct and unique. Part of my job as a pastor for leadership and transformation is to always come back to these key notes about what makes us here at Covenant important, significant, relevant, and unique. The thing that I get to come in over and over and over again is to emphasize something about who this congregation is. A congregation that values inclusivity, that values connection and community, that values belonging, that values that name that we have, covenant. What does it mean to be in covenant community with one another? What does it mean for us to take that covenant out into our lives and out into the world? Today we are in Mark chapter 9, where I love this little story, and I love the way that Mark tells it, because he has this little snippet there at the beginning that's not in the other Gospels around this. See, the other Gospels have this story as well, where the disciples are all competing with who's the least and who is the greatest. But in Mark's Gospel, it's unique in that Jesus overhears them and seems to not pay any attention to them as they're journeying along the way to Capernaum, right? He's listening, they're competing, they're challenging, they're arguing, and Jesus just keeps walking along the way, right? And then he gets there, and like good leaders do, hey, what were you guys chatting about? Right? And what do? They fell silent. They fell silent because they knew, didn't they? They knew, oh, I can't tell Jesus what I've been arguing with these fellow siblings in Christ about, right? Jesus ain't going to like my answer, right? And there's a guilt and a shame that probably fell over them, right? Who's the least? Who's the greatest? And friends, a lot of us have heard this story and heard this text in different ways over the years, in lots of different ways. And it's easy for it to fall on us and go, yeah, I mean, obviously, the first shall be last, and the last shall be first. And particularly when we get into conversations around religion and faith and who matters more to God, I think most of us understand, at least intellectually, what Jesus is after. But let's get into life now. Let's get into where you and I have these same conversations. Because I bet you're not going around the world and your little world, right? And going up to people and going, I'm better than you. Anyone do that this week? Anyone walk up to someone and tell them that you think you're better than them? Or that you think they are worse than you? Who raised their hand? Oh, CJ.
CJ is the only honest.
Okay, CJ is the only honest person in this congregation. Because even though we might not explicitly say that to people, we are constantly walking through our lives making judgments, aren't we? Better, worse, better, worse. I can use that person, I can't use that person. Right? See, so often in our lives, people are not creations in the image of God. They become objects for us to use. Objects for us, for me, for what I want in the world. And even the people that we love most can become objects to us. How can I get my partner, my spouse, to do what I want them to do this week? Anyone ever have that thought out there? Any little manipulations going on there? Anyone feel a sharp elbow in their side while they're sitting in church this morning, right? Yeah. And then when we extend that out beyond our familial relationships and the people that we most love and care for, people become objects real quickly, don't they? How many of you would love to get a whole group of people to vote your way this election, right? Yeah, and if we can just push just one way or another, then all of a sudden, I win, right? I mean, we say we win, but let's be honest. I win, right? Yeah, people become a tool, a resource, a network for us, right? Yeah, and I'm guilty of this too. I'm a pastor, right? One of the things that I do all of the time is, who am I going to recruit for a volunteer next? Right? And I start assessing you and thinking about you and going, okay, how do I get Susan? How do I twist her arm, right, to be on session? And I'm not trying to manipulate her right now. This is how this works, though, isn't it? We all do this all the time. We're constantly using people and trying to stack people up and stack ourselves against them. And every circle we walked into, including into this sanctuary this morning, we have these judgments that are going on inside of us. Better or worse, usable, not usable. Because we objectify human beings rather than see them the way that God sees us, as a unique creation, loved by God simply for being and not for how you can be used. What does it mean for us to see one another's humanity rather than how useful another person might be to us? And that's at the heart of this controversy that the disciples are having. They're not just trying to size one another up and go, pick me, pick me, pick me. It's about trying to get ahead. It's about trying to find a path where you don't feel like you are on the bottom. And all of humanity is in this race because there's a lot of people on the bottom. There's a lot of people who don't feel worth. And our systems and our structures and the way that you and I treat one another reinforces that narrative over and over and over again. So much so that you and I mentally could go around the room and make some snap judgments as to where we think people are in life and how that compares to me, to us, to the individual. And that's why I love how Jesus then pivots from this greatest and least into this next piece right here. Then he took a little child and put it among them. And taking that child in his arms, he said to them, "Whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me." Welcomes me, friends. Why? Because, friends, children, by their very nature, can't get you very far up the rung of ladders. You know what I'm trying to say. Up the ladder's rungs, right? They have nothing to give you that's going to get you further in life, on your career, towards power, towards money, towards all of the stuff, are they? No. Children are just children. They're beautiful and wonderful and messy and unique and different, right? They offer perspective and voice and uniqueness. But they don't have anything that I can really take and use to get ahead. Children are the key. In fact, children are so much the key that this story right here is in all the Gospels as well, in a different way, and usually not linked to this greatest and least piece either. It's separated out into another section in those Gospels. But Mark brings them together. Because for Mark, in Mark's perspective, this is key. It's not just about competition. It's about pushing our perspective to see something else, to see something different, to see through the eyes of a child. Children, like cats, are curious. Children, like cats, are curious. You and I, we're critical. Children are curious. You know that curiosity and having a critical mind come from a very similar part of the brain? They both require inquiry. They both require some questioning. They both require us to go, well, let me dig a little deeper. But curiosity ends with wonder, whereas the critical brain ends with me going, I thought so. Right? See, when we are engaged in these two different paths, they might even sound the same, right? We say comments like, that's interesting, right? As a pastor, I've been trained to say all the time, well, that's really interesting, right? It's one of those answers that doesn't really commit me to sharing with you what I actually think, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And yet behind that is interesting, is probably a whole bunch of stuff, a whole bunch of layers. But when a kid has interest, oh, that's different, isn't it? They're actually curious, at least for a moment, right? They're like, oh, that's new. I want to explore that. And, like children do, right? Squirrel, right? Interest changes real fast all the time. I can see Anna Lee, but there's Dawn, right? Real quick. And just like that, we move on. But the difference is, as an adult, I move on from Anna Lee to Dawn for reasons. Not just because it's a squirrel. Right? Yeah, I walk in and I go, oh, I need to talk to Anna Lee about volunteering, right? So I might be talking to Dawn here, but there's Anna Lee. I need to get over here, right? Hey, can you? Right? And she says no, right? Right? And this is you and me in so many situations of our lives. Because it comes down to this objectification that you and I make. Who is the most resourceful for me and to me at this moment? Or am I actually interested in this human being? Because they're a human being, made in the image of God. And what does it mean for you and I to take this value of inclusivity, this sense of belonging out into the world and not just make people objects? Because friends, even in inclusivity can be objectified and made to be a tool for something else. But this deep sense where I go, I include you, and you include me, and God includes each and every one of us. Oh, that's something altogether different, isn't it? Because God's not looking at you and me and going, how's this person going to be useful to me today? God simply looks at us and goes, I love you. I love you because you are you. And I created you to be the one and only you that will ever be here on this planet. There is no other you that has ever existed, nor any other you that will exist in the future. You are it. And God looked at you and said, I want you uniquely here on this planet. God says, I want to hear your voice. And you don't have to compete. You don't have to objectify. You don't have to resource. You simply just have to lift your voice with others.